What's up guys, you're watching Life ITCG. Got a quick video for you guys today on this Florian deck in Flesh and Blood's Silver Age format. So I played a very similar deck to this in Flesh and Blood's Project Blue format, which is like the precursor to Silver Age. And that deck was pretty decent, had a bit of fun playing that. But with the most recent set in Flesh and Blood, Compendium of Wraith, this deck has got a ton of new cards that you can use in Silver Age. So I just thought I'd take a few minutes to quickly talk about the list, a few of the cards that I'm playing, and the overall strategy. So Florian, his ability, if there are 4 or more Earth cards in your banished zone, if you would create 1 or more Aura token, instead you create that many +1. So the most well-known strategy for Florian in Silver Age, which was seen on the stream for the Calling London, is based around what's known as the full stack plan. Your idea is to just create a huge pile of rune charts, as many as like 30 or 40, right? And just send them all in one huge attack. So that way, no matter how defensive your opponent's being, no matter how many blues you expect them to have in their hand to Arcane Barrier, right? They're just going to not be able to survive your huge turn. So that's certainly a valid way to play the hero. Florian can build up a lot of rune charts relatively quickly with his hero power. The problem with this strategy is that it's so one-dimensional. So aggro decks against that, even though you do put many cards in your deck to try and help you to block, the cards that make rune charts are themselves not super efficient. So the upside of this strategy is that your damage ceiling in a turn is basically uncapped. So against a defensive deck, no matter how defensive they're trying to be, you're going to be able to get over that eventually. But if your opponent's being very aggressive into you, it's typically the case that they will be able to run you over before you've been able to build up a lethal number of rune charts. So that is a problem when decks like Briar are very popular in the format. The other problem with this version of the deck that just wants to make rune charts slowly and never attack until the final turn of the game is that it struggles a lot into board state decks that can summon allies to the board and start attacking, because you're not going to present any attacks back to threaten those allies. So I'm talking about decks like Dromai, decks like Enigma. You don't have any ability to deal with allies at all. So those matchups also are a huge struggle. So instead of playing that type of strategy, I've got a more mid-range type of deck built around this weapon Nebulablade. So it looks like it only has 1 power, right? Pretty bad, but it gets +3 if you've played a non-attack this turn, and it only costs 2 to attack. So attacking for 4, essentially, that's like Titan's Fist, one of the best weapons for Guardian. It only costs 2 to attack, and it has the rune chant on hit. So broadly, this is a pretty above rate card for the format. As long as you have a non-attack that costs 1 or less and is worth 3 value, this is like a 2-card 7 play that threatens the on-hit rune chant as a breakpoint. So as long as you can keep consistently doing that, block 2 cards, send 2 cards with the Nebulablade, right? Slowly over time, you should be accruing more value than whatever your opponent is doing. So that's the main game plan, right? And then once your hero power is online, of course, Nebulablade is threatening 2 rune chants on hit, not just 1. So if your opponent is trying to cover all that every turn, they're going to get fatigued by overblocking. If your opponent is letting this hit, right, they're going to get chipped down by the rune charts. So yeah, that's overall the main game plan of this list. So the list then is broadly split into 3 different types of cards, I would say. So you have cards that help you swing the Nebulablade, cards that help you banish Earth to get your hero power online, and then just some more defensive cards to help you stay alive. And then of course you have the resource base as well. So the rest of the equipment I'll talk about towards the end of the list, right, when you have a bit more context for what they're for. But in terms of the cards that help you swing the sword, right, those 1-cost go again cards that give you 3 value, we have Harvest Season, right, just 1 cost, gain 3 life. Strong Yield, 1 cost, give your attack +3. Sprout Strength, which is no cost, give your attack +3. And Laden with Earth. So Sprout Strength is a new card, right? Earth, 0, go again, your next attack gets +3. Laden with Earth costs 1, right? Your next attack gets +3, but nicely we have this extra effect. If an Earth card was pitched to this, create an embodiment of Earth, right? Embodiment of Earths, of course, they make your non-attack cards block for 1 more. And remember, if your hero power is online, that will make 2 embodiments, not just 1. So potentially you're getting a lot of value out of this card, right? If you pitch the Earth card into it and your hero power is online. So that's the idea there. Overall, your game plan is to play one of these cards off a blue and swing the sword, right? To help you get the hero power online, we have Cadaverous Tilling, right, which has the Decompose ability. You're banishing 3 cards from your graveyard, attacking for 8. We also have Tilling in blue, so it's much less good to be attacking with this one, right, because it only has 4 in the bottom corner rather than 6. But it's also part of your blue base, right, and the other Decompose attacks are not really that good, right, compared to having the option of the extra blue. And a new card that we've got in the deck, Chorus of Rotwood. So it looks really nice, right? The 1 cost looks like it combos with the sword. Unfortunately, this card does not have Go Again. If it did, it would probably be way too strong. So it has Decompose, so again, you're banishing the 3 cards from your graveyard. If you Decompose, create an embodiment, and you're also creating 3 rune chants. So if this Decompose turns on your hero power, it gives you the 4 earth cards in your banish zone. You're creating 2 embodiments and 4 rune chants. So it's still not that good of a play if you're spending an entire card to do this, because remember this costs 1, so you have to get a resource from somewhere. But this is the perfect card to spend your equipment resource on, right? You have your Garland of Spring, which gives you 1 resource once per game, right? It's the perfect play to block out with all the rest of your cards as much as possible. Start of your turn, use your Garland of Spring for 1 resource, and then play Chorus of Rotwood. So you're not applying any pressure immediately by doing this. So you're giving the opponent full tempo, but you are passing the turn with 2 embodiment of Earths. So it's going to be pretty difficult for them to push any significant damage through. And then you also have the 4 rune chants. So your next attack is going to be quite substantial no matter what you're doing. So at one point I thought, well, okay, if Chorus of Rotwood is clearly so much better when you're using the Garland of Spring on it and you only have 1 Garland of Spring per game, do you only want to play 1 Chorus of Rotwood in the list? But it turns out, in my opinion, that I think you want to be able to do this like early and consistently. So playing 2 copies of the Chorus is best, just to make sure you draw it more often. And then we also have a few more new cards that help banish Earth cards from your graveyard to get your hero power online. So we have Runic Felling Song, 3 cost, 7 power. When this attacks, you may banish an aura from your graveyard. If you do, it deals 1 arcane damage. So as long as you're banishing an Earth aura, you're contributing to turning your hero power online. And even though this only banishes 1 card, if your Decompose cards banished 3 Earth cards, because when this attacks, you may banish 2 Earth cards and an action card. Well, that action card can also be Earth. So you can banish 3 Earth cards from a Cadaverous Tilling, and then 1 Earth Aura from a Runic Felling Song. That's all you need for your hero power to be online. And then we have a couple of other cards that banish Earth Auras. Well, 1 technically. This Sigil of Silverday in the blue. So when this enters or leaves, you may banish an aura from your graveyard. If you do, deal 1 damage. At the start of your turn, destroy this. So it's actually quite difficult to have 2 Earth Auras, or 2 auras at all for that matter, in your graveyard for you to get both arcane damage triggers out of this. So notably, when it dies at the start of your turn, it can't banish itself, because it says you may banish another aura from your graveyard. So having 2 auras in your graveyard already when you play this is quite rare. But in a pinch, if you have to, you can play it to just banish 1 Earth aura. If you turn on your hero power, that's still probably worth it. And this does have go again, so you can play this as your non-attack action to trigger the sword and then pitch another blue and you're still attacking for 4. So it's not terrible, and it is just a blue non-attack with 3 block, so it's good with the embodiments as well. And then your last card, which can banish an earth card, right? Sometimes you just need to banish 1 earth card if you've done the decompose, is So Tomorrow. It banishes itself whenever you play it. So it doesn't really do a whole lot, right? Just put an attack from your graveyard back onto the bottom of your deck. But it does have go again, so again, it will power up the sword in any turn that you play this. So one thing just to be careful of is that you can't play So Tomorrow if you don't have a target for it, and the deck doesn't have too many. So the best one, of course, is the red Cadaverous Tilling, because this is a good card to redraw and then play it again, right? It's above rate, 1 card 8, right? But the other targets, you have the blue Tilling, the Fruits of the Forest, and the Autumn's Touch. So you're not excited about putting a blue Autumn's Touch back in your deck, right? But sometimes you have to do that just to get your 4th banished card by playing the So Tomorrow. So when you're decomposing and you're choosing which earth cards to banish, if you do have that luxury, make sure to leave a target for So Tomorrow in your graveyard in case you draw it later. That's one of the key points for playing the deck, is managing your earth cards for your decompose. But yep, so that's all the effects that banish. And then finally, we just have a few cards which help you block better. So Sigil of Suffering, a pretty well-known card in the format. Blocks 3, deals 1 arcane. If they don't prevent the arcane, it blocks 4. So potentially it's a 1 card 5, that's above rate. You have Reduced to Rune Chant, also blocks 4, right? Makes a Rune Chant, so that's a 1 card 5. If your Hero Power's online, it makes another Rune Chant, so that's a 1 card 6. Right, so this is why you want to play Florian, right? Once your Hero Power's online, you have the sword, you have these defense reactions, right? Over time, your cards should generally be more value than your opponent's, right? If you have time to play a few turns and play a few of them, right, you will eventually eke out a bit of an advantage. So the last card in the list, which I will classify as a defensive card, which may not really look like it, and probably the strangest card in the deck, is red Hocus Pocus. So this card by itself is actually not terrible as a 1 card play, right? It is 1 card 4 value, right? When it attacks, create a Rune Chant, it attacks for 3. If your Hero Power is online, it's making 2 Rune Chants, so it's a 1 card 5. The main reason why this is in the deck is to have a 1 card play that lets you reliably end your turn with a Rune Chant. And the reason why you want to do that is because it lets you play Reduced to Rune Chant for free. Right? If you have to pitch a card from your hand to play Reduced to Rune Chant, right, the value proposition on it is no longer very good. Right? If you have your Hero Power online and then it's a 2 card 6, which is only just on rate, right, that's still not what you're looking for. Right? And if it's not online and you're having to pitch a card into this, then it's below rate, right, which is very bad. Old Knocker is banned now, so your chest resource can't pay for it. You can only Garland of Spring in your own turn. So it is very, very important to be able to consistently play this for free. And if your only way of ending your turn with a Rune Chant is either by passing your turn by not attacking at all, right, giving your opponent the full tempo back, or by swinging with the sword, right, which is also not that reliable because in aggro matchups that end very quickly, your opponent's going to have some some Blade Beckoner equipment to be able to throw in front of this and deny you the hit. So you won't have a Rune Chant, you won't be able to play your Reduced to Rune Chant for free. Right, so it's very, very critical to have some sort of attacking piece that reliably lets you end your turn with a Rune Chant. So in slower games, this is not as critical, right? You're not under so much pressure. You can sit on this for a couple of turns and eventually you will get a hit in with the sword, right? At which point you can play it for free. Or because you're not under so much pressure, you're more comfortable pitching a card for this. But against aggro, it is very, very important to be able to play this for free, right? It's one of your biggest value plays you can make in that type of matchup. So that's largely what Hocus Pocus is for. right? It might sound a bit inconsistent to combo two cards like that in this format, and maybe it is a little bit, but it definitely does help. But I would say that the Hocus Pocus is the most fringe card in the deck. It's most likely to be able to be cut for something else, right? Every other card in the list does a very solid job, I think. Um, yeah, so the last cards, which I haven't really talked about yet, um, I could talk about Route Strength a bit more, the fact that it costs 0 rather than 1. Um, because before this card came out, right, you were playing, or sorry, I was playing, I think red Condemned to Slaughter in that slot instead, which costs 1 rather than 0, which doesn't often matter, right? Because usually the idea is that you pitch a blue, pay 1 for a card, then use that 2 remaining to play the sword attack. So it's just another card that gives your next attack +3 with go again, right? So it activates the sword. This one does block 3 though, whereas the Earth card only blocks 2. And sometimes you do get to use this destroy aura effect, like versus Enigma, you get to blow up their shields, or if Azalea gives you a Bloodrot Pox or something, um, you can have some play with that. But the fact that this is Earth is really, really key, right? You want to make sure that your Decompose alive as soon as possible, and you can always convert this, right? So if you have a hand where you have this plus another 1 cost, or this plus an attack action, like a Cadaverous Tilling or something, right? You can always convert this into +3, like without paying the resource, right? So this card's very strong. The other interesting thing about this is that you can do the sword attack off a blue through a Frostbite when your pump spell costs 0, which doesn't come up that often, obviously, but it's worth pointing out, I think. The last card in the list that's not really just a resource is this Arcane Seed's Life, which doesn't really need explaining, right? If you have a hero power online, your hero power, then each instance of this gets doubled. So you get 4 rune chance, you gain 1 life. It's Earth block 3 with go again. It's just like the perfect card. Definitely one of the reasons to be playing Florian. And then some of the resource cards, right? We've already talked about the blue Tilling. This is just a blue block 3 Earth card. It's the only card that does that. This is a blue, only blocks 2, but if you have the hero power online, it makes 2 mites when you block with it, so you're still getting 4 value out of it, which is pretty good. Condemned to Slaughter and Oath of the Arknight, right? These are basically just blue block 3s. In a late game scenario, you can use these to turn the sword on. It's a bit awkward with Oath because it costs 2, but it doubles the rune chant when your hero power is online, so it's okay. Fruits of the Forest, it's just a blue earth card, right? If you have extra cards in your hand, it always converts for 2 value just by discarding it, so that's pretty good. Sigil of Earth, again, this card's very weak if you play it, just making 1 embodiment, right? But it is Earth, and it is an aura. So there aren't actually that many Earth auras in the game. We're playing all of them, at least all the ones that are legal in Silver Age. It's only Harvest Season, Strong Yield, and the Sigil. So you do want to pretty consistently have at least 1 Earth aura in your grave, so you can get your hero power online with this card. So Sigil of Earth is fine. Right, you do want a decent number of your blues to be Earth again because of this card. Right, getting the embodiment of this is usually worth like 2 value or sometimes even more depending on how you're blocking on the next turn. So I think I've talked about every card in the main deck. We'll just jump back now and talk about the equipments really quickly. So Well Grounded is nice because it blocks arcane damage, so you don't have to spend another slot on AV on the shoes, but you still have a equipment that does something versus like Kano, for example. So this card's really nice. The helmet is really good. So if your hero power is online, then it blocks 2, which is a pretty good rate for equipment in this format. But notably, you can also block with it really early, and it puts another Earth card in your graveyard to turn your Decomposers on. So always make sure that if you're planning on decomposing on your next turn, that you check your graveyard and you make sure you have the Earth cards that you need. Otherwise, it's not a bad move to just block with this so you have the Earth card ready to go. And then the arms, this ability is almost like flavor text. You hardly ever use it. Because it doesn't have go again, you have to end the turn and basically arsenal whatever aura you get back. So the only situation that you would do this basically is that if you had to block awkwardly and your last card was a blue that you didn't want to arsenal, rather than just pitch the blue and attack with the sword for 1, which is obviously not very good, then you could maybe activate your arms and arsenal like a strong yield or something. So it's worth remembering that because it might come up, but mostly this card is here just because it's unconditional block 2 on the arm slot, right? There's no other card in Silver Age you could play that's better than that. So again, it's another nice add from the new set. In the sideboard now, so we have our Arcane Barrier equipment on the head, the arms, and the chest. So Nullrune Gloves has no extra text. This one you don't use that often, but like for example, if you get Kano down to 1 and you attack them with at least 1 rune chant, they have to kill you with the rune chant on the stack. So it hasn't popped yet. So in that instance, you can use the instant effect on this and you get 1 free health, basically. So that's worth remembering. It does come up sometimes. The extra ability on this, I mean, in theory, you could maybe use it versus like Fatigue. You can get back a Runeblade attack and a Runeblade non-attack. So if you get back Arcane Seed's life and Runic Felling Song, that's quite a lot of extra damage. But the problem is that this doesn't have Go Again. So like, I don't know if you can ever find space to do this. Because like if you activate this and then you immediately have to block a sledge or something, you're basically wasting all the value that you got off it anyway. So yeah, maybe that's not really worth it. But it's just AB1 on the head, right? If it was just Nullrune Hood, you'd also play it. Then we have Arcane Polarity, right? Everybody's basically playing this in Silver Age, just have more life versus wizards. And then we have some more anti-fatigue cards. So 2 Evergreens and 1 Rites of Replenishment. So Rites of Replenishment, you're not really expecting to do the Arcane trigger on this, because the matchups you're boarding this in, they're going to be trying to AB you a lot. But sometimes it does come up, right? Either you just swing 1 rune chant with it and they feel like it's not worth it to AB. In that case, the best value non-attack to get back is probably this one, right? In a late game scenario, it's worth +3 and do the sword, but it also gives you the embodiment to help you gain some extra life. So just remember that when you're decomposing, right? You might want to leave that one in your graveyard. And then, but mostly this is in the deck to do the fuse mode. So you attack with it, you fuse, you get an attack back. So the best target for that, of course, probably red tilling, right? 8 damage going back into your deck, or you can also get back your evergreen if you had to block with it or play it from your hand. Right, and also So Tomorrow can get that back as well, right? This can get back your evergreen or the Rites of Replenishment. So potentially we're rebuying a lot of value back into our library or into our deck by playing this So Tomorrow, right? And then the last card we have Unmovable. So versus like Flattering Showman, for example, you can answer big dominate attacks, or like versus Volder, same thing. Azalea, same thing. Yeah, it's just a nice value play that helps you to block. So that's the whole list. Again, the strangest card I think is the Hocus Pocus. Everything else I feel pretty confident about keeping how it is. If you wanted to play a new card for this Hocus Pocus, again, it probably wants to be a red. It probably wants to be something a bit defensive. One option would be the new defense reaction, the Weeping Battleground. When you block with it, banish an aura, deals 1 arcane. So that's not bad, right? It helps you turn the hero power on. One thing I'm a little bit wary of with playing that card is that you would then have 6 defense reactions in the deck. So if you play against an opponent that's not attacking you, like Kano, for example, you have 6 red D-reacts, which don't really do anything. Realistically, you're boarding in 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 at most cards, right? Which is not the worst. If you have to have like 1 weird reduced to rune chant or something in your deck versus Kano, it's probably not the end of the world, right? But it's just something to keep in mind. But you also have now a lot of cards that want to banish Earth auras. You don't have that many Earth auras to banish. So that might be a bit of an odd choice, but the red Weeping Battleground is probably okay. If we scroll further down here, other options you could play in that slot, red fruits, right? So if you have to attack with it, it's not terrible. It has 7 power. You can also convert it into 2 health straightforwardly. Again, you could cut the Hocus Pocus just for this. It also blocks 3, right? It's a non-attack as well, which is better when you're blocking because it works with embodiments. Yeah, you could also play red Autumn's Touch as the same idea, right? It blocks well, it blocks 3, it's an Earth card. So those are probably the main candidates for replacing the Hocus Pocus, right? So none of these replacements perform that role of ending your turn with a rune chant. So you would have to decide that, well, okay, maybe that's not an effect that the deck really needs that much. But those are probably the best options, I would say. Um, One final thing I will talk about, cards that I'm not playing, right? Because these are often seen as like signature Florian cards, are these Incantations, this Malefic Incantation and Runeblood Incantation. So these cards make one rune chant times 3. So if your hero power is online, that's 2 rune chants times 3, which is 6 value for one card, which is quite above rate, right? Like that's the whole reason why we get so excited about playing reduced to rune chant. So the reason why I think these incantations are actually not very good, right? Against aggro, they only block 2. So if you're having to block with them, right, that's bad. If you're playing these out versus aggro, they don't do anything on the turn that you play them. So you're spending an entire card from your hand, passing the turn back to your opponent, and if they kill you on the swing back, right, then these cards just didn't do anything. Or even if they make just 1 or 2 rune chants out of it, that's also below rate for a card, right? So the chance of you surviving long enough for these to fully convert is relatively small, I think, if you're playing these versus aggro. So that's not great, right? And then versus slower decks, where you can expect, okay, maybe I'm should be likely enough to survive where I can make all 3 rune chants with these. The problem then is that these are decks which are prepared to be arcane barriering versus you, right? They probably should have enough blues that they're happy to be doing that. So if you're using Runeblood Incantation against these matchups, right, it might not actually be dealing any damage, or maybe just a couple, but it's not taking a card out of your opponent's deck at all because they're pitching to barrier it and then the card's going back into their deck. So in a fatigue battle, right, these cards are making you fall behind, right? They're not actually helping you that much. So they're not what you want versus aggro, and they're also not what you want versus fatigue. I don't know that there's any matchup where these thread the needle, right? They actually become something desirable. And in that same role as the Hocus Pocus, right, ending your turn with a rune chant, Malefic Incantation looks like it might do that, but it doesn't trigger when you attack with a weapon, right? And so many of your attacks during the game will be with the sword, right? Your only other attacks really that you want trying to attack with are your Cadaverous Tilling and your Felling Song. So it's not even really helping out with that. It's not really helping you play your Reduced to Rune Chant for free like you want it to be doing. So yeah, that's why I'm not playing these incantations. I think they're not really the right fit for the list. Um, but so yeah, just the Hocus Pocus is like the one card where I'm like, could that maybe be something else? But everything else seems to run pretty smoothly. It's like a pretty fun deck to play, right? You have on hits, you attack, you block. It gives you a good taste of everything that Fab has to offer. But if you have any questions or comments, I'd definitely be interested to hear that. So you can leave that down below. But otherwise, this is going to be all from me for today. This has been Li-Fi TCG signing out.